My new boss fired me on Friday, calling me incompetent and worthless. What he didn't realize was that I secretly owned the patent his entire company depended on. By Monday, the roles were reversed, and his empire stood on my terms. He fired me on a Friday afternoon and told me not to come back Monday. That was the only thing he got right, because on Monday, I wouldn't be coming back as his employee. I stood in his glass-walled office hugging a thin cardboard box like it could keep me from breaking. New boss, new cologne, same canned speech about shareholder value. He never looked directly at my face, only at the numbers I'd made for the company, lying in a binder I'd compiled, the one he slid back to me as if it were contaminated. "I won't spend another dime on an incompetent employee," he said, crisp as a stapler click. I smiled because fury shows up as a tremor in my hands, and I refused to let anyone see me shake. "Good luck," I told him, and my mouth tasted like pennies. Outside, the office smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. People stared at me with the kind of sympathy that doubles as distance. I nodded, wished Rebecca and Ops a good weekend, and took the elevator down with a plant I didn't even like. It drooped in the corner of the box, some office fern that had learned to live without sunlight. We were not so different. On the sidewalk, the late summer heat pressed through my blouse. I set the box in the trunk of my Civic and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I counted. I counted the patents I'd drafted, the prototypes I'd ushered through the lab, the late nights I'd spent solving other people's messes. And then I counted to 1, because there was one patent that mattered most. The first one. The one I filed under my maiden name, before the company demanded everything open-sourced for team cohesion. The one nobody realized was the skeleton under our new line. The one I owned. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Dinner Sunday? You okay?" I typed back, "Sunday yes. I'm okay." It wasn't a lie. Okay is the surface of the lake. Below it, the current listens. At home, I kicked off my heels and padded into my kitchen, where the sunlight laid itself across the table like a cat. I brewed tea. I lined up my contracts on the wood, like a detective arraying suspects. The arbitration clause. The NDA. The handover I'd refused to sign for the first model because my attorney isn't comfortable, and then the project moved so fast the paperwork got postponed. Orderly chaos, like most breakthroughs. We launched. We won awards. Last quarter, the product carried half the company revenue on its back. And all this time, the ownership line had remained a ghost thread through the fabric, thin, invisible, strong. I found the email chain. I found the provisional filing. I found the final patent number. My name on the USPTO page still gave me that dizzy little cliff-edge feeling, pride and vertigo married in a courthouse ceremony. I called David, my patent attorney, who eats statutes for breakfast and is kind enough to remind me to breathe when I start designing sentences like schematics. "Bad timing," he said after hello. "Or perfect. Depends on your taste for theater." "Theater," I said, "is fine." I told him what happened, how the new boss, Ethan, with perfect cufflinks and an MBA that arrived like a weather system, decided I was an expense he didn't need. David hummed. "And he doesn't know about the thread." "No," I said. "He doesn't know he's been knitting a sweater with my yarn." "Then we'll be polite first," David said. "Polite, documented, and firm. I'll draft a notice of use and a proposed licensing framework. Overnight service to the CEO and board, copy legal. They'll have a weekend to read it." "Monday," I whispered. "Monday," he confirmed. "If they refuse, we escalate. Injunction, royalties, the works." I put the phone on speaker and began organizing the paper. See. There's a calm that arrives when your path becomes a hallway rather than a forest. I highlighted clauses. I printed receipts. I placed a clean stack in a blue folder labeled with my own handwriting, thread. It felt right. By evening, the sky over my little apartment stained itself gold. I texted Rebecca, "Hey, do you still have the board liaison's mailing info?" The physical address? She replied so fast it felt like she'd been waiting. You didn't hear it from me, 18th floor, 2416, Fortin Avenue Executive Suite. Then, you okay? Better than okay, I wrote. I'm organized. I slept for the first time in months, really slept, dreaming of a loom and hands that moved without me, weaving something resilient and quiet. Saturday, I kept it ordinary. Laundry. A grocery run. I talked to my neighbor in the hallway about her toddler's new obsession with stickers. I took a slow walk past the river and watched a girl skip rocks with her father. Ordinary is an armor you can wear to war. By noon, David's draft arrived. I read each word aloud, tasting their weight. Not rage, not threat, just a statement. You are using my patent, here are the terms, here is the date by which to respond. It was the tone of a door being knocked on, not kicked in. I approved the draft. David filed. A courier would be riding the elevator to the 18th floor before dinner. Sunday, my mother served chicken with rosemary, and we sat on her small porch. She tucked a loose curl behind my ear like I was 8 again. You always did like puzzles, she said. And you always did like finishing them. It's not revenge, I told her. Not the loud kind. It's correcting the label on a jar that everyone's been using. Same shelf, she said gently. Different decibel. We laughed. It felt good. That night, I ironed a navy dress and polished the only pair of pumps that didn't betray me. I set 3 folders in my tote, thread for the patent, river for the sales numbers, weather for market forecasts. I packed a pen that never blotted. If Monday wanted theater, I would be punctual with my ticket. At 7:12 a.m. on Monday, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A number I didn't recognize. The display showed the company's exchange, an extension I'd never seen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, and then slid my thumb across the screen. Ms. Hale, a woman's voice asked, tight as a violin string. This is Elaine from the executive office. The board would like to. She stopped. Papers rustled on her end. A second voice entered the line, deeper, rushed, too familiar. Sarah, Ethan said. Can you come in this morning? We need to. I checked the time, the address printed on David's courier slip, the shine of my shoes waiting by the door. I lifted the phone back to my ear, smiling where he couldn't see. Ethan, I said. I'm already on my way. The lobby of Fortin Avenue's tallest building gleamed like a stage before the curtain. Brass railings. Marble floors buffed to a mirror sheen. A fountain murmured in the corner, as though even water here had learned to whisper. I adjusted the strap of my tote and crossed toward security. The guard scanned my license and printed a badge with a faint click. Visitor, Executive Suite. My reflection stared back from the plastic, steady and unsmiling. The elevator rose with a soft hum. At the 18th floor, the doors opened to silence. Carpets muted every step, as if sound itself respected this level of decision-making. Elaine, the board assistant, stood waiting in a blazer that looked tailored to discourage questions. Ms. Hale, she said, voice precise. This way. We walked past glass offices where blinds hung half-drawn. Behind one, I glimpsed Ethan pacing, phone glued to his ear, his tie slightly loosened. His posture betrayed him, sharp angles of a man suddenly aware that the ground beneath his feet might be shifting. Elaine ushered me into a conference room the size of my apartment. Long table, leather chairs, screens dark but waiting. A pitcher of water glistened under the lights. At the far end sat 3 board members, files already open before them. Their eyes lifted as one, assessing. Ms. Hale, the man in the middle said. His voice carried the weight of decades in polished rooms. We've received documentation from your attorney. You claim ownership of patent 1194B, currently in use for our flagship line. I don't claim, I said gently. I slid the blue folder, thread, onto the table and opened it, page after numbered page. I own. Filed, granted, maintained. Under my name. Every unit you've sold this past year has leaned on its structure. Every award you've won has hung from its framework. The woman to his right leaned forward, fingers steepled. And you are no longer an employee. No, I said. By Mr. Carter's choice. I did not glance toward the glass wall where I felt Ethan's presence like static. But employment is not ownership. Not when contracts were left unsigned. Not when filings were independent. Not when the chain of custody was never transferred. A silence fell, taut as stretched thread. One of them scribbled something into the margin of his notes. Another adjusted his glasses and reread the first page. The door opened. Ethan strode in, his cufflinks glinting like small shields. He took the seat beside them, posture defensive, jaw locked. She's bluffing, he said, too quickly. We have rights. Sit, the chairman said, calm as stone. Ethan froze, then obeyed. I poured myself water, my hand steady now. I don't wish to dismantle your business. I'm proud of what we built. But I will not allow my work to be used without acknowledgement or fair terms. And what do you want, Miss Hale? The woman asked, her tone neither hostile nor warm, simply weighing. I met her eyes. A license. Reasonable royalties. My name restored on the patent citation. Transparency. And if we refuse? Ethan asked, voice thin, like glass about to crack. I closed the folder with a soft thud. Then we go to court. And the Monday launch you promised investors becomes a Monday injunction. The board members exchanged glances. Papers shuffled. Someone's pen tapped once, twice. Finally, the chairman leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Give us the day, Miss Hale. We will deliberate. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress, gathering my folders. Of course. I'll await your decision. As Elaine walked me out, Ethan caught up, lowering his voice like we were conspirators instead of adversaries. You don't know what you've started, Sarah. His smile twitched, unsteady. This is bigger than you. You'll regret. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since Friday. Calm, clear, unshaking. No, Ethan, I said softly. This is exactly my size. And I stepped into the elevator, leaving his words stranded in the hall. By the time I reached the street, my phone buzzed. A new email from David. The subject line read, urgent, preliminary response from board counsel. I stopped under the shade of the fountain's arch, heart thrumming, and opened it. The email was short, too short for comfort. Board counsel acknowledges receipt. Requesting immediate meeting to discuss provisional licensing. Expect contact within 24 hours. 24 hours. That meant they weren't dismissing me outright. It meant the board had tasted the weight of what I'd placed on their table. I walked toward the river, phone still warm in my hand. Morning traffic hummed, horns sharp, footsteps hurried. Yet inside me, the air was still. Calm like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Back home, I brewed coffee and spread my folders across the table again. I reviewed every clause, every date. I highlighted gaps, underlined confirmations. I wanted no surprises when the lawyers came pressing. By afternoon, my inbox pinged again. This time, a direct message from Rebecca. Word is, Ethan's in panic mode. He called 3 emergency meetings. People are whispering that the product launch may stall. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. But my fingers hesitated before sending. Because I wasn't just fine, I was standing at the edge of something larger, and the ground beneath all of us was shifting. I closed the laptop and let the quiet fill the apartment. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about protecting my work. It was about something deeper, reclaiming the years I had given away, piece by piece, without anyone noticing. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, negotiations, maybe threats. But tonight, I allowed myself a small, steady smile. Because Ethan thought he'd ended my story on Friday. He had no idea it had only just begun. The next morning, I dressed deliberately, navy again, steady, professional. My tote felt heavier with the folders, though nothing new was inside. Weight, I realized, could come from expectation. At 9 o'clock sharp, David called. Their counsel reached out. Meeting at 11. Conference room on Madison, neutral ground. Neutral ground. I liked the sound of that. The room we met in was stripped of personality, white walls, oval table, chairs that squeaked if you leaned too far. On one side, David and I. On the other, two attorneys in gray suits who introduced themselves briskly, already flipping through binders. Ms. Hale, one began, the board respects your contributions. However, given the scale of this company's reliance on the disputed patent, we need assurances. A license arrangement must be stable and non-disruptive. Stable and non-disruptive. Polite language for don't shake our empire. David adjusted his glasses. My client is not here to disrupt. She's here to correct. Royalties at industry standard, attribution restored. Nothing more, nothing less. The second attorney scribbled something, then looked up. And employment? Would Ms. Hale consider reinstatement? The question caught me. I thought of the cubicles, the fluorescent lights, Ethan's voice dismissing me like a smudge on his schedule. No, I said quietly. Not under current leadership. My future isn't behind that desk. For the first time, the attorneys really looked at me, not just at the papers, but at me. One gave a small nod, almost respectful. We'll take this back to the board, the first said. Expect a decision within 48 hours. The meeting ended with handshakes, formal and cool. Yet when we stepped back into the sunlight, I felt taller. David glanced at me. You were clear. That's what matters. And I knew he was right. Whatever the board decided, I had already taken back something they couldn't measure, my voice. 2 days stretched like weeks. I worked from my kitchen table, not as an employee anymore but as a woman reclaiming her authorship. Every hour, I checked my inbox, though I pretended to myself that I wasn't waiting. By Thursday morning, the email arrived. A single subject line from David, decision. I clicked. Board has agreed in principle. Licensing to be granted with royalties at negotiated rate. Attribution restored. Details pending. Meeting set for Friday, 10 a.m. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands didn't tremble the way they had on Friday when Ethan dismissed me. Instead, they were steady, calm, like I'd been holding a bowstring taut and finally released it. I texted my mother, it's working out. I'll explain Sunday. She sent back 3 heart emojis, her digital way of hugging me across town. At 10 o'clock sharp on Friday, I entered the boardroom again. Ethan was already there, shoulders rigid, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He didn't greet me. He didn't have to, the silence between us was its own introduction. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Hale, the board has reviewed counsel's recommendations. We recognize your rightful ownership of patent 1194B. Effective immediately, the company will license the technology under fair terms. You will receive royalties quarterly. Your name will be reinstated on all citations and materials. I inclined my head, keeping my voice level. That is acceptable. The chairman's gaze softened, just slightly. We regret the circumstances that brought us here. It seems oversight allowed certain errors. His glance flicked toward Ethan, who stared down at the table, jaw clenched. David outlined the formalities, papers slid across the table, pens clicked. I signed my name once, twice, sealing the future with ink. When the meeting adjourned, Ethan followed me into the hallway. His voice dropped, low and strained. You think you've won, don't you? He hissed. You've humiliated me in front of him. This isn't over. I stopped, turned to face him. You're right, I said softly. It isn't over. But not in the way you think. For the first time, his confidence cracked. The cufflinks, the MBA polish, it all seemed like a costume that no longer fit. I walked away, each step steady, knowing he had fired me thinking I was powerless. And now, on paper and in truth, I held the thread his empire depended on. Friday sunlight poured through the tall windows as I left the building. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow of the company. I felt like its spine. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The news spread faster than I expected. By Monday, trade journals picked up whispers of a quiet legal correction at Ethan's company. They didn't mention my name, not yet, but insiders knew. Rebecca texted me, "Everyone's talking. Some are relieved. Some are scared. But they all know now you weren't just disposable." I sat in a cafe by the river, sipping black coffee, watching joggers pass by. For the first time in months, I wasn't rushing to a meeting or cramming a sandwich between design sessions. I had time to breathe. But freedom carries its own weight. Every email from David reminded me that royalties would come, that the contract was real, that I was financially secure in ways Ethan couldn't touch. Still, a question coiled in my chest, now what? That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Hale?" The voice was smooth, deliberate. "This is Martin Green from Axion Technologies. I believe we're competitors of your former employer." I stiffened. "Yes? I'd like to meet. Off the record. We've been following your work for years, even before this recent situation. There may be an opportunity to collaborate." Collaboration. The word bloomed in my mind like a door opening. We met 2 days later in a quiet office overlooking the city. Martin was older, gray hair at his temples, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't waste time. "You designed something they can't live without," he said simply. "And they treated you like a line item to erase. That's not leadership, it's arrogance. At Axion, we value the people who build, not just the ones who present." I leaned back, letting his words wash over me. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "Consulting, to start. Independent. Your patent revenue gives you leverage. You don't need a job, you need a platform. Help us refine our upcoming line, lend your vision. You'd work on your terms." My terms. The phrase felt foreign, dangerous, and thrilling all at once. That night, I walked home through streets lit by neon and street lamps. My mind replayed Ethan's words, incompetent, not worth another dime, and contrasted them with Martin's vision, platform, your terms. At my apartment, I set the folders back on the table. Only now, they weren't a shield against the company. They were a bridge to something new. I knew one thing for certain, Ethan thought he had ended me. But really, he had freed me. And as I drifted to sleep, one thought pulsed steady as a drumbeat: this is only the middle of the story. The following week blurred with quiet steps toward a new life. Meetings at Axion felt different, lighter, sharper, as if my voice carried weight instead of being trimmed down to cost-effective options. I wasn't bound by corporate ladders or office politics anymore. Every idea I shared was mine, credited and valued. But while I was sketching prototypes with Axion's engineers, Ethan was unraveling. Rebecca called one evening, her voice hushed. "He's furious, Sarah. He blames you for everything, the delays, the board's cold shoulder, even the investors pulling back. People say he's not sleeping. He storms through the office like a storm cloud." I listened quietly, the steam from my tea rising between us. "That's not my doing," I said. "That's the truth catching up." She sighed. "Still, be careful. He's desperate. Desperation makes people reckless." I knew that. And yet, instead of fear, I felt a kind of solemn calm. I had lived for years in silence, letting others control my narrative. Now the silence worked in my favor. Ethan's empire depended on me, but I no longer depended on him. Late that night, I sat at my desk, drafting ideas for Axion, the hum of the city outside my window. I felt something I hadn't in a long time, not revenge, not triumph, but freedom stitched together with possibility. And beneath it all, a quiet certainty: Ethan's story with me wasn't over. But this time I was the one writing the ending. Friday morning arrived with rain tapping against my window, steady and insistent. I poured coffee, opened my laptop, and found an email waiting with Ethan's name in the header. For a second, my chest tightened, then I clicked. Sarah. We need to talk. Privately. The board is difficult. Investors are restless. I know you've made your point, but if you care at all about the company you helped build, meet me. Lunch, Monday. Same cafe near the river. I stared at the words. They dripped with something he hadn't shown before, not authority, but plea. I forwarded it to David. His reply came within minutes: do not go alone. He's cornered, and cornered men lash out. But if you want closure, we can structure it carefully. Closure. The word felt heavy. Did I want it? Or did I just want him to see, face to face, that I wasn't the person he thought he could discard? By Monday, the rain had cleared, leaving the air scrubbed clean. I walked to the cafe with deliberate steps, folder tucked under my arm though I doubted I'd need it. Ethan was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee that had gone cold. His suit was pressed, but his eyes were rimmed red, his face drawn. When he saw me, he tried to smile. It looked painful. Sarah. You came. I did, I said, sliding into the chair opposite. What do you want? He leaned forward, hands clasped. I need your help. The board trusts you now more than me. The product line, they keep asking if you'll consult. If you'll stand behind me instead of against me. I let his words hang in the air, the desperation stitched into every syllable. And in that silence, I realized, he wasn't asking for partnership. He was asking for rescue. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the spoon clink against the cup. His eyes followed the movement, restless, searching for an answer I wasn't ready to give. Ethan, I said at last, you didn't fire me because I was incompetent. You fired me because you never looked closely enough to see my worth. And now, when the foundation trembles, you want me to hold up the walls for you. His jaw tightened. I misjudged you. Fine. But you're part of this legacy, too. Don't you want to see it survive? I almost laughed. Survive? You mean save you. The company will survive, with or without you. But you made sure I wouldn't be part of it. That was your choice. For the first time, he had no retort. His hands unclasped, falling flat on the table. He looked smaller somehow, like a man realizing the empire he thought he owned was never his to command. You could come back, he whispered, almost pleading. We could fix this. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I don't want to come back. I don't need to. My work already speaks for me, and it will outlast both of us. What I want is simple: acknowledgement, fairness, and freedom. I have that now. His expression faltered, torn between anger and despair. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words failed him, as they often do when the truth has no cracks to slip through. I stood, leaving a few bills on the table for my untouched coffee. Good luck, Ethan, I said quietly, the same words I'd told him the day he fired me. Only now, they weren't brittle with humiliation. They were final. As I walked out, sunlight broke through the cafe windows, scattering across the floor like shards of gold. My steps were steady, certain. I didn't need to look back to know he was still sitting there, surrounded by the silence he had once tried to bury me under. Because this time it was his silence to carry. The following weeks unfolded like a sunrise, slow, deliberate, impossible to stop. Axion signed me as a consultant, giving me freedom and respect in equal measure. My patent royalties arrived in the first payment, proof on paper that my work finally carried my name. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost behind someone else's curtain. Meanwhile, whispers reached me about Ethan. the board had grown impatient. Investors demanded accountability. His sharp suits and louder speeches could no longer hide the cracks. By the end of the quarter, he was quietly transitioned out. No headlines, just a line in a press release: leadership restructuring. I read it once, folded the paper, and slipped it into a drawer. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was release. One evening, as the city lights shimmered on the river, I sat with my mother on her porch. She poured tea, warm and fragrant, and looked at me with that steady gaze only mothers have. "You don't seem angry anymore," she said softly. "I'm not," I admitted. He gave me silence, and I turned it into a voice. "That's enough." The air hummed with crickets, the world settling into calm. I realized then that revenge hadn't been my victory. My victory was freedom, the quiet kind, the lasting kind. And as the night deepened, I knew my story wasn't about being fired. It was about being set free.